So one of the biggest things about leadership is ethical dilemmas, and it's one of the hardest things to also be able to make a decision on. So ethical dilemmas are basically dilemmas that involve the moral principles that guide our decisions. So let's say that you want to advocate for the homeless, but you also want to advocate for clean water in Africa. Oh, but you only have $10 and you can't split it five and five. So which option do you have to choose? Another one is someone in your company might be dragging you down, but they also need the job. So that in itself is also an ethical dilemma. Which do you choose? Because on one side, he's hurting the company. On the other side, he has no other job and he needs this job. So, a couple common ones that I've seen throughout my years of helping out other people, whether that's business owners, students, teachers, whomever, and it's conflict of interest, whether that's like favoritism towards a friend, whether that's uh, conflict of interest. Who do I support in an argument? Uh, Another one is the challenge of balancing profit and social responsibility, which is kind of like the same thing. And for me, I've helped out a company that does window washing and hires the homeless. Well, on one side, when you hire the homeless, yes, you give them a job. Yes, it's a good thing. But at the same time, if the homeless person's bad and it drives down profits, then what do you do? And another one is just deciding on whether or not to go with unethical practices, whether that's for selfish gain or whether that's for cheaper manufacturing or to get materials cheaper or to get labor costs cheaper. Basically, in some way to benefit you, but it is unethical. So I actually have a framework on how to do ethical decision making, and I'm going to show you it here, but if you also want to, down in the description below is a link to the picture of my framework. So, first step is identify it. What is the issue and why is it an ethical dilemma? Once you can narrow it down to exactly what the core is, what is the decision that needs to be made, then you go on to consider the people around you, the quote unquote stakeholders. Who is going to be affected by the decision that you make? And this is a very important part because if it's just one person, then yes, that makes it easier. But if it's the entire company, that makes it a lot harder because it's not just one person on the line, it's the entire company, it's the entire team on the line. Third is to evaluate your options. So, with the company that does window washing, we've had a guy who kept doing drugs, who kept on weed. And while weed is legal in Arizona, we don't advocate for that. And in fact, we highly discourage it, and we don't want anyone on our team to do weed. So we were in an ethical dilemma of okay, we could either fire him, we could put him in rehab. He didn't want to go into rehab first, but that is still an option. Then there's firing him, there's leaving him alone, there's all these different ways that we could do it. We could do a pay cut for every time he did it, especially on a work site. Hey, you can't do it during the hours of our operations or any time before. You're not allowed to smell like or present yourself like you have smoked weed because it looks bad on our company, our brand. The fourth is to make a decision, and that goes off the evaluation on what areas you can solve for. For us, the best thing for us to do was to offer counseling and to offer a support to get off weed. He did not accept, so unfortunately, we had to let him go. And that was just our decision. And the last step is to reflect on this decision. Was it the best? Could we have done more for him? Possibly. This only happened a couple days ago, but at the same time, it's okay. what could we have done better? What did we do right? And what did we do absolutely wrong that we should have improved on? Because at the end of the day, he is still a human. You know, for the sake of this video, we'll call him Jacob. But Jacob was a really good guy. He just smoked a lot of weed, and we didn't want him to smoke a lot of weed. He didn't deserve to be on the streets. He didn't deserve to have to worry about how to feed his family. But he put us in a position to where he didn't want help on the one thing that, not the one thing, but on one of the things that we desperately tried to tell our employees, hey, we put our foot down for any alcohol abuse, any drug abuse, because I myself know what the consequences are of that. And I've seen it time and time and time and time again, whether that's through the people I work with, whether that's through personal relationships, whether that's through professional relationships. I've seen time and time again the effects of it, and I will not tolerate it within my companies. Now, of course, if you want to smoke weed, you can smoke weed. We can still be friends. I'll tell you, please stop, but I don't mind it. But if you're working for me, and especially if I'm giving you more leverage to get out of a hole that you're in, I would love to be able to do that and to help you out even more. But if you're not willing to follow my one strict rule of please no drugs, no alcohol, at least, not in accession, then I feel like we wouldn't be good to work together because you wouldn't have that self discipline when we work together, especially if I am acting as the manager, as the leader, that you would do your job properly as well. And it's just that connection. But when you're doing this, you also want to be able to build an ethical culture. And it's hard to balance the two, but by building an ethical culture, you have to lead by example. So I've never done drugs, I've never drank an alcohol. Like, the closest thing to drinking alcohol or doing drugs is legitimately prescriptions or Advil. But when you lead by example, then others will follow naturally. So in my teams, I work so much, and my teams see that, and so they follow along and they work just as hard, if not harder than I do. I try to work to my absolute limit, and that will cause employees to feel inspired, especially if I help them out and I want them to succeed and I give everything I can to them to succeed. Then they're going to work as hard as me because they feel just as motivated, and they're following me because I'm leading by example. I'm not just telling them to do something, I'm showing them how I do things, and I want them to follow what I'm doing so they can be their own leaders. I also encourage open discussions about ethics. I mean, I keep my foot down about drugs and alcohol, but I invite all my team members all the time to debate me. Hey, why should we allow alcohol, drugs? You know, because if it's legal, then it should be fine, right? But we have these ethical conversations all the time where it's just like, okay, you could think this, and I can agree with how you think. However, this is how I think, and I understand your point of view. This is my point of view, and this is just from the stats, this is from the facts that I've seen, and your opinion isn't wrong, but I believe my opinion is more right because of the fact that I prove my opinion with data while you're proving your opinion based on personal experience. Both are completely valid, but when you have one that's based on data, that's based on hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of people versus two or three people, who am I going to believe more? And that's not to discredit any of my employees. In fact, I keep encouraging them to keep talking about it because then it allows me to gather more information about how each person lives. And that in itself is incredibly insightful and helpful for all my employees, because then they feel like I care and respect them, because I do. But I don't just say I do, I show it by allowing them to come up to me and challenge the way I think, challenge my ideas, and to be able to work with me on these ethical dilemmas. And the last one is just implementing clear policies on ethical behavior. Again, I encourage discussion about it, but I'm very clear: no drugs, no alcohol, not on work site. And if you do it outside of work, only in moderation, at a very low level. Like I'm not going I can allow, once a week on your day off, sure, go smoke some weed, go smoke a blunt, whatever. Obviously, as long as it's legal and as long as you're not overdoing it. But that's the thing. If you're smoking fentanyl, I don't care if, you know, you're this. I don't want you a part of my company because, one, you're doing illegal activity. But even if it wasn't illegal and you just did it way too much, the effects show for more than just that one day. There's something that Alex Ramosi says, and it's: when you drink, it costs you 2 days, the night you drink and the day after. And I completely agree with that on every substance. If you smoke weed, it affects you that day and the day after, because the day after, you're still going to smell like weed. The day of, obviously, you smoked weed, you're going to have those effects. If you drink alcohol and you wake up and you have a hangover, guess what? It just affected both your days. And sure, one, it might be short term good, but for the second day and possibly the first day too, it can completely screw up your life. Like if you black out drunk, how is that going to look? If you do something stupid, because that affects you not just in the moment, but it could possibly have you killed. You do drinking and driving. I've lost so many friends already to drinking and driving that I don't even talk about to anyone. But there's driving while high, there's all the, being driving under the influence or taking action under the influence will severely affect your life forever. But it's good to remember that, even with all of this, it's important to understand leaders face pressures from others to compromise their values. So you have to keep strong to your principles and have everyone around you understand what your principles are, and allow for them to challenge these ideas, and don't discredit them. Have an open discussion, but you also should stay firm in your core beliefs. But let me know in the comments below of some ethical dilemmas that you have, and I can possibly help you out. Now, I'm no expert. However, I feel like I can probably provide some good insight to it. And if you think that this will be helpful to anyone, if there's a leader who's going through an ethical dilemma, or a business owner who needs to hear about this, share this with them so that way they understand how ethical dilemmas work and how I think about them and how I do it as someone who has done over $50 million worth of projects. So please share, comment, subscribe if you can. But appreciate you guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.